There was a place far away from the noise of the city, a quiet land where red soil kissed the soles of bare feet and goats wandered freely near tall palm trees. This place was called Ikudu, a village surrounded by soft hills and thick forests. In the morning, smoke would curl from clay cooking huts, birds would sing above the thatched roofs, and the voices of women in bright wrappers would float through the air as they pounded yam or called children home. The heart of Ikudu was the village square. There every week, people came from nearby towns to trade. Roasted groundnuts, woven baskets, carved masks, palm oil, and pepper-scented fish wrapped in banana leaves. Under makeshift canopies made of raffia, sellers called out to passers-by, and drummers played rhythms that made the very air move. In this village lived a young man named Seku. He was not rich. He did not wear fine clothes, but he had something stronger than gold, a kind heart, quiet strength, and hands that knew the shape of every tool in his workshop. Seku was a carpenter. His fingers were always nicked and calloused, and his back often ached, but he loved his work. From morning until night he carved stools, beds, doors, and shelves for the people of Ikudu. He lived in a small mud-walled home at the edge of the village. The roof was patched with old straw. Inside lived his aging mother, who often sat on a stool weaving baskets, and his two younger siblings, Nena and Chidi, who played in the dirt and waited for Seku to return from work with roasted plantain or sweet mangoes. Life was not easy for them, but Seku never complained. He smiled, he worked, he gave. He did not chase parties or riches. He chased peace. Up on the highest hill of Ikudu stood a great stone house with painted walls and carved gates. That house belonged to Chief Ayodele, the wealthiest man in the entire region. He was a trader, not of small things, but of great. Goods, spices, fine fabrics, carved ivory, and precious stones. His caravans came back with camels, perfumes, and wealth that showed in every corner of his compound. But more treasured than all his goods was his only daughter. Adesua was known across villages. She had the glow of royalty and the grace of a dancer. Her skin was smooth like shea butter, and her hair was thick and long, always styled with cowries and gold clips. Wherever she walked, people stared. Her laughter was like a song. She wore dresses made from imported silk, and her sandals never touched mud. Young men dreamed of her. Mothers whispered about her. She was the prize of Ikudu. But long ago, before all the jewelry, before all the parties, Adeswa had been just a girl, and Seku had been just a boy. As children, they played near the Ide stream, throwing stones, chasing dragonflies and laughing as though the world was theirs. Seku would carve little wooden birds or lizards with his pocket knife and give them to Adesua. And she, giggling, would share dried coconut or sweetened cola her father brought from faraway markets. They were different, yes, but in childhood, differences do not matter. They made memories in those early years that stayed with Seku. Even when everything else changed, time passed. Adesua's father saw her beauty and knew her value. He began shaping her into a lady of class. He sent her to live with her aunt in the city of Obodo, where she learned how to walk with books on her head, how to smile without showing teeth, how to play the harp, and how to speak to nobles. Seku, meanwhile, lost his father to sickness. He became the man of the house far too soon. Every day before sunrise he fetched water, cooked, cleaned, worked in his workshop, and helped his mother with the farm. While Adesua went to dinner parties, Seku was mending broken stools. While she danced under lanterns, he rubbed his aching hands in silence, but he never forgot her. Every market day, he saw her returning from the city, walking like royalty, her clothes shining in the sun, surrounded by her rich friends. And though they never spoke anymore, his heart still beat faster when their eyes met. Adesua remembered Seku too, but only faintly, like a song from long ago. She smiled at him sometimes, even nodded, but in her mind, their paths had already split. She belonged to the world of big dreams, polished shoes, and power. Seku, to her, belonged to the past. Still, Seku held on. He believed in something deeper than status. He believed in love. He told himself, if I work hard enough, if I become more than this, maybe, just maybe, she'll look at me again. So, for many weeks, he saved every coin he could. At night, while others slept, he carved a small wooden box with tiny flowers, suns, and lovebirds etched on its surface. Inside he placed a necklace made from river pearls and carved beads, a simple gift, but one made from the soul. He planned to give it to her at the Festival of the Drums, the biggest event in Ikudu, when lanterns lit the square and music filled the night. On the night of the festival, Sekou wore his best white wrapper and oiled his sandals till they shined. He walked into the square with the wooden box held close to his chest. His hands were sweating, and his heart was pounding like the big drum that echoed through the village. Adesua stood near the central fountain, laughing among her friends. She wore a dress of silver and blue, and gold dangled from her ears. Her laughter rang louder than the music. Taking a deep breath, Sekou stepped forward. "Adesua," he called gently. She turned. Her friends turned. A silence fell. "Yes?" she said, eyes curious. I want to give you something," he said, voice steady but soft. He opened the box. The necklace glowed under the lantern light. "I've loved you since we were children," he said, eyes searching hers. "I know I have little, but I have a heart full of love, and I will work all my life to give you the world. Will you marry me?" There was silence. Then Adesua tilted her head and laughed. Not a gentle laugh, but a loud, sharp laugh. "The kind that cuts. You?" she said, smiling as if he'd told a joke. "Marry me." Her friends giggled behind their hands. "You don't even own a proper house, Sekou." "What would I be? A village wife scraping yam while others wear diamonds? Please." She turned and walked away, her silk dress swaying, her perfume lingering. Sekou stood frozen. Around him the festival roared with drums, laughter, and firelight. But in Sekou's heart there was only silence. Eyes followed him. Whispers floated behind him like smoke. People didn't need to speak loudly, their looks said enough. Some shook their heads in pity. Others smirked with cruel amusement. He stood where he had once imagined joy, now surrounded by shame. The necklace he had carved with love sat heavy in his pocket. The girl he had loved since childhood had rejected him before the whole village. Not with sorrow, not with respect, but with laughter. But with sharp, cold public laughter. That night he didn't return home right away. Instead, Sekou walked to the river, the same one where he and Adesua had once played as children. The moonlight shimmered on the water. The frogs croaked from the banks. The stars blinked silently above like ancient eyes. He sat on a rock staring into the dark ripples and whispered through clenched teeth, "One day, I will come back, not as this. Not as the boy you mocked, but as the man you'll wish you had believed in." It wasn't anger that filled him. It was something deeper, a spark, a fire that had waited quietly for too long. And now, it had caught flame. The next few days felt like walking through smoke. The air in Ikudu had changed. Wherever Sekou passed, voices hushed. Eyes looked away, then back again. The same people who used to greet him with smiles now pitied him, or worse, laughed behind his back. He couldn't bear it. The carpentry workshop that once brought him peace now felt like a prison. Even the tall palm tree beside his house, the one he used to rest under after long hours of work, now cast a shadow that followed him. One evening, as the sky turned purple and the scent of roasted cassava drifted through the village, Sekou sat beside his mother. They were silent for a long while. The chickens clucked in the distance, the last light slipped behind the hills. "I have to leave, Mama," he finally said. His mother, Mama Nwaka, turned to him slowly. Her eyes had seen many things, hunger, loss, war, but she had never seen her son this still, this heavy. "Ikudu is no longer mine," he said. "I don't want to run away in shame. I want to walk into something new, something bigger. I want to build the life I dreamed of, even if it's far from here." Mama Nwaka reached for his hand. It was rough, scarred from carving wood, just like his father's once was. "Your father believed in you," she said softly, "and so do I." She rose slowly and went inside. When she returned, she held a small goatskin pouch in her hand. Inside it were coins, old coppery saved from years of silent sacrifice. "It's not much," she said, pressing it into his hand. "But it will carry you to the gate of your new life. Just promise me this, don't lose your soul while chasing the world." Sekou nodded. His eyes were wet, but he didn't cry. Before dawn, he tied his bag, tucked his tools in a wrap and hugged his mother tightly. And then, without looking back, he walked away from Ikudu, away from pain, away from laughter that cut, and towards something he couldn't see, but believed in. The city was nothing like the stories. It was loud. It was fast. It smelled like metal, dust, and roasted groundnuts. Buses honked like mad goats. Traders screamed the prices of used clothes, second-hand radios, and mangoes that were half rotten. The buildings stood tall like they wanted to scrape the sun. Sekou had never seen anything so huge or so lonely. He found a corner in a crowded boarding house in Odanla, a poor district on the edge of the city. The roof leaked. The room smelled like wet clothes. But it was a place to sleep, and that was enough. Each morning he wrapped his worn-out tools in cloth, slung them over his back, and walked the city like a ghost. He stopped at every building site, every shop, every carpentry stall. "I can carve. I can build. I don't ask for much," he would say. Most ignored him. Some laughed. Others said, "Come back next week." But no one gave him work. Days passed, then weeks. His pouch emptied. He began eating once a day, a bowl of cold fufu and palm soup from the street vendor if he could afford it. But he never gave up. The fire inside him stayed lit. One day, after another wave of rejections, Sekou wandered to the docks. The sun was sinking into the sea, painting everything orange and gold. He sat on a pile of old crates, head bowed, heart heavy. Then a voice interrupted the silence. "You look like a man who's tired of being turned away," it said. Sekou looked up. Standing there was a broad-shouldered man with silver in his beard and cement dust on his boots. His name was Bako, a foreman on a construction site not far from the harbor. "I don't hire dreamers," Bako said, "but if you can carry more than you complain, come tomorrow." Sekou stood before the sun even rose. That first day nearly broke him. He hauled wooden beams. He mixed cement under the scorching sun. He hammered until his palms blistered. Sweat poured from every inch of his body. His shirt clung to his skin. His muscles screamed. His feet ached, but he did not stop. He did not complain. When others rested, Sekou worked. When others cursed the sun, Sekou looked up and thanked it for showing him his strength. Bako noticed. "This one," he said, pointing at Sekou, "this one is fire." Weeks turned into months. Bako taught him more: how to measure walls, how to read building plans, how to fix roof frames, how to count materials and not get cheated by suppliers. At night, Sekou stayed behind and swept the site. He asked questions. He borrowed books. He took notes by candlelight. Then one day Bako handed him a measuring tape and said, "You lead this team today, let me see what you've learned." Sekou did not fail. When the first year ended, Sekou took his wages and bought himself something, small but powerful, his own set of brand new tools, not borrowed, not broken, his. He wrapped them in cloth and held them like a child. With those tools he started taking on side jobs, repairing chairs, building shelves, fixing doors in the poorer parts of the city. Word spread. "There's a boy from the village who works like 10 men," people said. By the second year, Sekou was no longer just a worker. He was a name, not famous, but respected. His clients trusted him. His hands were fast, but his heart was steady. He saved enough to rent a tiny shed. He turned it into his own workshop. 1 bench, 2 shelves, and a signboard he carved himself. Sekou's hands. Strong, honest, true. He didn't stop there. He found 2 young boys, brothers who had lost their parents. He saw something in their eyes, the same hunger he had once carried. He gave them food, a mat to sleep on, and taught them how to shape wood. "You don't need to be rich to stand tall," he told them. "You need hands that don't quit." By the end of his 3rd year in Odanla, Sekou had more than a shop. He had a team. He had clients. He had a name carved not in gold but in grit. And the boy who once left his village in shame was slowly becoming the man he had promised himself he would become. The sun had barely kissed the city rooftops when Sekou arrived at the dusty construction yard. His shirt clung to his back. His boots scraped, and the sweat on his brow was not from heat. It was from purpose. In the months he had worked under the watchful eyes of Master Bako, the once quiet boy from Ikudu had changed. He no longer spoke. Like a dreamer. He walked like a builder. Bako, the grey-bearded foreman who once doubted him, now nodded quietly when Seku spoke. "That boy," he told the others, "he doesn't carry wood, he carries vision." One evening, after everyone else had left, Bako called him over and said, "There are men in this city who build with money, but men like you build with soul. Come, it's time others see that too." And just like that, Bako opened doors. He introduced Seku to merchants, architects, and city planners, men with clean robes and wide compounds, men who spoke in numbers and shook hands with their eyes open. Some scoffed when they first saw Seku, in his patched shirt and faded trousers. But one by one they changed their tone when they saw his drawings, his math, his confidence. They heard the way he spoke about foundations, materials, human labor. He knew things most rich men only pretended to understand. Soon, contracts started. Coming. At first it was small, a shopfront here, a storage house there. But the jobs grew, so did his team. He trained young boys from the slums and turned them into craftsmen. He paid them fairly, he fed them, he told them, "We build more than walls here, we build our futures." In just 3 years, Seku had gone from sleeping on a rotting mat to owning his own yard. Seku and Sons construction, carved into wood and nailed above a strong metal gate. The people of Odanla whispered his name with respect now. They said, "That one, he came from nothing, but look what he's become." Back in the village of Ikudu, high on the hill surrounded by flowering trees, Adeswa's life was unfolding, exactly as she had planned. Or so it seemed. Her father, Chief Iodel, eager to protect her status and beauty, arranged a meeting with a suitor from the neighboring city of Elugwu, a businessman named Kasimu. Adesua had seen pictures of him before he arrived, tall, broad, always dressed in imported caftans and Italian shoes. When she met him, he smiled with the confidence of someone who had never heard the word no. His gold rings sparkled when he reached for her hand. His voice was deep and smooth as palm wine. Kasimu spoke of ships, warehouses, and lands. He brought her silk dresses in boxes and golden earrings in velvet bags. Adesua, dazzled by his wealth and worldly charm, felt her heart whispering, "This is what you were meant for." Within a few weeks their engagement was announced. The village erupted in celebration. Women danced, men drank. Young girls dreamed of being the next Adesua. Preparations for the wedding began immediately. It would be the grandest Ikudu had ever seen. Chief Iodele hired decorators from the capital, imported ivory-colored tents, and summoned a famous orchestra to play under the stars. Adesua glowed. Her dresses shimmered. Her smile was everywhere. But behind the lace veils and wedding laughter, there were cracks. Kasimu was not what he seemed. He often interrupted her when she spoke. He dismissed her opinions with a smirk. He told her what to wear, when to speak, and how to sit. "You are mine now," he whispered once, pulling her close. A jewel should be seen, not heard. Adesua ignored the warnings. She told herself it was just his way, that wealth came with pride, and pride came with power. Still, whispers traveled through the village. Some said Kasimu's business was not as strong as it looked. Others spoke of debts, unpaid workers, and a quick temper. But Adesua, blinded by the dream of her perfect wedding, refused to hear. Meanwhile, in the bustling heart of the city, Seku's world was shifting once again. One foggy morning, after nearly 2 years of climbing, he walked down the noisy roads of Agbaji Street, where vendors shouted, "Buy yam here!" and motorbikes weaved through traffic like fish in a stream. He was on his way to a routine client meeting when he paused near a street corner, overhearing 2 men in sharp suits arguing. The bio. "Site is falling apart," one said. "I told you not to hire those amateurs," the other snapped. "The investors are furious. We'll lose everything if that building isn't ready by next month." Seku listened, his heart kicking. He stepped forward. "Excuse me," he said, his voice calm. "Are you speaking of the new commercial center? On Butte Crescent?" The 2 men stared. "Yes," one replied, suspicious. "Why?" I can fix it, Sekou said. The men blinked. You? I'm not just a carpenter, he said. I manage teams. I understand structure, labor, time, and cost. Give me 1 week, let me turn it around. They hesitated, but something in his voice, the quiet certainty, made them pause. One of the men, Mr. Jatao, finally said, Fine, 1 week. If you can bring this mess back on track, we'll talk again. Sekou nodded. What he found on the site was chaos, piles of materials rotting in rain, workers standing around with no orders, paperwork missing, budgets torn, deadlines ignored. The previous contractor had vanished after being paid. Sekou rolled up his sleeves. That very day, he divided the workers into teams. He reordered supplies. He brought in food so no one would leave midday. He worked side by side with the crew, hammering, lifting, cutting. He stood under the sun and spoke to angry investors, calming them with confidence. He worked day and night. He barely slept. He ate bread with groundnut paste on the floor of the site office and bathed from a bucket. By the end of the 7th day, the project was alive again. Concrete had been poured. Steel frames were up. The workers smiled now, proud to be part of something working again. When Mr. Jatao visited the site and saw the transformation, he shook Sekou's hand and said, You didn't just save a building, you saved our name. From that moment, Sekou's life changed. The city took notice. The names Sekou and Sons began to carry weight. More contracts came in, residential homes, market halls, event centers. He met architects, investors, city officials. Some wanted his ideas, some wanted his loyalty, all wanted his work. But Sekou never changed his walk, his speech, or his price. He remained simple, clear, unshakable. He taught his workers to greet every client with respect and every mistake with correction. No shortcuts, he said. We build what will last longer than us. He reinvested his profits, buying tools, training youth, offering work to the jobless in Odanla. He didn't forget where he came from. Back in Ikudu, Adiswa's wedding, day was growing close. She had everything. The dress, the shoes, the dancers, the imported drinks. But her nights were sleepless. Kasimu had become colder. He ignored her messages. He changed plans without telling her. He brushed off her questions with laughter. Still, she pushed forward. This was the future she had chosen, the dream she couldn't let die. One rainy morning, Sekou stood by the window of his office, watching the sky weep over the rooftops. He held a carved picture frame in his hand, a photo of his late mother, Mama Nwaka, smiling in her wrapper beside a young Sekou with dust on his cheeks. He had not been back to Ikudu since the day he left. The village that once filled his lungs now sat only in memory. The red soil, the river where he carved toys, the mango tree outside his house, the bench where his mother gave him her last pouch of coins. His heart tugged. It was time, not to prove anything, not for revenge, just to see it all again. Just to breathe where he once bled. Sekou packed a small bag. He told his team, I'll be away for a few days, the past is calling. And then in a sleek black car, polished, strong, quiet, he began the journey home. When he entered the lands of Ikudu, it felt like a dream wrapped in dust. The trees still swayed the same way. The hills still curved like sleeping giants. The river still whispered in the same rhythm, but the boy who left had become someone else, and yet somehow still himself. He stopped by his old house. The mud walls had been repaired. The roof was stronger. A family lived there now. He stood at the gate, touched the wood gently and whispered, Thank you, Mama. He walked through the village slowly, eyes drinking every detail. Some villagers recognized him, others didn't, but the whispers returned. Is that Sekou? No, it can't be. He came back? And then word reached him. Adesua was getting married to a rich businessman from another city, a man named Kasimu, a name Sekou had heard in passing once or twice in the city, spoken with both admiration and caution. Sekou sat beneath the tree near the river that evening, the same one he had sat under 5 years ago after Adesua laughed at him. But this time his heart didn't burn, it was still. He thought about how far he had come, how much he had grown. He didn't come back for Adesua, but he also couldn't deny the tug of curiosity. He decided quietly to attend the wedding, not for her, for closure. The sun over Ikudu burned hot that day, as if it too wanted to witness the storm that was about to come. Trumpets echoed from the highlands. The air smelled of fried plantain, perfume, and the burning charcoal under roasted meat. Women in flowing lace gowns moved like royalty across the flower-strewn courtyard. Men in crisp agbadas whispered under their breath and adjusted their head caps. A gentle breeze stirred the banners, each printed with the names Adesua and Kasimu. A royal union. The mansion at the top of the hill was bursting with color. Its large marble pillars were wrapped in golden cloth, and imported lilies bloomed in bowls of glass. People from as far as Elugwu, Keta, and Loko had traveled for this event. Adesua's father, Chief Ayodele, had promised his daughter a wedding worthy of queens, and today the whole region was watching. Inside a wide chamber, Adesua stood before a mirror. Her dress glittered with beads, pearls, and silent pressure. Her jele sat like a crown, woven high, dramatic, bold. Her lips smiled, but her eyes searched the mirror like someone looking for herself. Servants fussed around her, adjusting her jewelry, dusting her shoulders with powder. Her aunt whispered, "You look like a goddess today." Adesua nodded but said nothing. There was a storm in her chest she couldn't name. At the altar stood Kasimu. He wore gold from head to toe. His kaftan shimmered in the light, and a thick chain rested on his chest. He looked out over the seated guests, grinning as if he had won a prize. To him, Adesua was not a partner. She was a possession, a symbol of status, a beautiful feather in his already high cap. He didn't look for her eyes in the crowd. He didn't care if she was nervous. His only concern was how many powerful hands he could shake after the ceremony. The musicians began to play a soft tune. The ceremony was moments from beginning, but then a deep black car rolled through the village gate. It was slow, silent, immaculate. The villagers who caught sight of it stopped mid-step. Women dropped their fans. Children stood on tiptoes. Men narrowed their eyes and whispered, "Is that who?" "I think it is." The car door opened, and Seku stepped out. He wore a simple yet royal outfit, deep blue agbada embroidered with silver threads, a staff of polished wood in his hand. His shoes gleamed. His face was calm, not proud, not angry, just still. The Seku who had once walked barefoot with a toolbox on his back now walked like a lion among goats, not roaring, just present, just undeniable. Whispers spread like fire across the mansion grounds. "Seku? From the carpenter's house? Is it really him?" People stood. People stared. Some clapped in disbelief. He walked slowly toward the grand gates of the mansion, where guards stepped aside without being asked. Every footstep echoed, not because of sound but because of memory. He was stepping into the same place he had once left in shame, the same soil where laughter had cut his heart. But now it was his name that shook the ground. Inside the wedding hall the music paused, guests turned, eyes widened, and at the center of it all, Adesua looked up and stopped breathing. Seku, not the boy with rough hands, not the shy man in torn sandals, but Seku the builder, Seku the success story, Seku the man who now stood taller than even Kasimu. Her chest tightened. She had heard rumors, yes, whispers of his company, his rise, his name on people's lips. But seeing him in person was something else. It was like watching a tree you planted as a child return as a mountain. Kasimu noticed her gaze. "Who is that?" he asked coldly, his brow furrowing. No one answered, because deep down they all knew. Seku walked down the aisle like it belonged to him, not because he wanted to steal anything, but because he had earned the right to stand anywhere he chose, as he reached the altar. The drummers lowered their instruments. The air grew still. Seku turned to the crowd. His voice was calm, strong, clear. "I know this is not my event, but there is something the people of Ikudu deserve to know." Gasps flew like birds through the crowd. Adesua clutched the edge of her gown. Kasimu stepped forward. "Who do you think you are?" he barked. Seku's eyes met his, not with anger, but with weight. "I am the boy who was once called worthless," he said, his gaze sweeping over the hall. "The one who gave everything, and received only laughter in return. I left this place with nothing but shame in my pocket, and a promise to myself. I said I would return. And I have." People sat down slowly, mouths open. "I built something," Sekou continued. "Not with revenge, not to show off, but because I believed my life could be more than one broken moment. And today that belief stands tall." Adisua's lips trembled. Sekou looked directly at her now, his voice gentler. "You once said I had nothing, that I could offer you no future. But today, the company that employs your husband-to-be belongs to me." The silence broke into chaos. Chairs shifted, hands flew to mouths. Kasimu's eyes widened. "You're lying," he hissed. Sekou turned to him. "The mansion you stand in, you rent it. As of last week, I bought it as part of a merger. This land now belongs to Sekou and Sons." Thunderous silence. Adesua's face changed, from confusion to horror to something deeper. Realization. She had chosen glitter over gold. She had chosen surface over soul. And now, the boy she rejected stood as the man she had hoped to marry. All along, just too late. Kasimu's fists clenched. "You planned this?" Sekou shook his head. "No. I came to sit quietly, but I won't let lies dance while truth sits outside the door." Then he turned to Adesua. His voice softened, but his eyes stayed firm. "I loved you once, and I don't regret that. But what you threw away became my reason to rise." He nodded respectfully, then turned to leave. Kasimu stood frozen. His feet were planted, but his soul had been shaken loose. The weight of what Sekou had just revealed crashed over him like a wave, slow, heavy, impossible to stop. All around him, eyes stared. People whispered. The powerful businessman, the groom dressed in gold, the man, who was supposed to own the day sin had been exposed. His wealth, borrowed. His company, owned by the very man he mocked. His pride, shattered. And the mansion, the one his family claimed for the wedding. It was now Sekou's. Kasimu's lips moved, but no words came out. He blinked fast, as if hoping the truth might vanish. But it didn't. Adesua turned to him, her face pale, her mouth trembling. "What do we do now?" she asked, her voice a soft, broken whisper. Kasimu didn't answer. He couldn't. His world, the image he had crafted so carefully, had just cracked in front of the entire village. The wedding that was supposed to be the most glorious event in Ikudu's history had become something else entirely. A public undoing. Guests shifted in their chairs. Some looked away in embarrassment. Others stared, frozen in second-hand shock. The air, once filled with music and perfume, now held only tension. The girl who once believed she had chosen the best was now standing in silence, heart hollow. Adesua turned her gaze back to Sekou, who was already walking away, calm, steady, without anger. She watched him with eyes that carried shame and longing all at once. The boy she rejected had become a king, but not the kind that needed a crown. He had built his empire from pain and patience, and now he was leaving her behind, just as she had once walked away from him, the same man, but different hearts. Sekou paused for only a moment at the edge of the gathering. He looked back at Adesua one last time, not with pride or revenge, but with quiet sorrow. "I hope you find what you're looking for," he said gently. Then he turned and walked out of the mansion. Adesua didn't call after him. She couldn't. Her voice had vanished with her pride. The days that followed were not filled with celebration. There were no more drums. The gifts were quietly packed up. Some guests left early. Others didn't know what to say. Adesua, once the girl who walked with her chin high, now walked through the empty halls of the mansion with bare feet and a bowed head. The same golden dress now felt heavy, useless. The mirrors reflected nothing but regret. The village had moved on, but her heart could not. Kasimu tried to explain himself. He made promises, loud ones, desperate ones, but Adesua no longer believed in his voice. She had heard a better one, a quieter one that spoke with action instead of noise, and that voice had already walked away. The love she thought she had found in gold and fine suits had never been love at all. It had been status, transaction, image, and now the image had cracked. She sat by the window most mornings, staring out at the same village paths where she once turned her nose up at a boy who offered her a handmade gift. She remembered his words, his hands, his heart, and the way she had thrown it all aside for something shinier. Now the shine had dimmed, and the hands that once carved her toys were building cities without her. Meanwhile, Sekou was back in the city, back to meetings, plans, workers, foundations, but even in the middle of blueprints and bricks, his mind sometimes wandered to a riverbank in Ikudu, to a girl who once smiled at him before pride got in the way. He didn't hate Adesua. How could he? She had been the fire that woke him up. The laughter that broke him was the same spark that lit his journey, but he knew one thing now, clear as a sharpened chisel. Some people walk with you forever, and others are just part of your story's beginning. Sekou didn't tell anyone what happened at the wedding. He didn't need to. The work spoke louder. His company grew even bigger. He opened a second branch in another city. He began offering scholarships to poor children, especially those from villages like Ikudu, teaching them not only to build wood and stone, but to build themselves. Start with your hands, he'd say, and let your heart guide where they go. One evening, after a long day of meetings, Sekou stood on the roof of one of the buildings his team had just finished, a hospital for mothers and children. The wind was soft, the sky was red, and as he looked down at the lights glowing in every room, he smiled. He had dreamed of this, not the money, not the buildings, but the ability to leave the world better than he found it. And he had done it, not through revenge, but through vision, through sweat, through choosing his path over someone else's approval. Back in Ikudu, Adesua lived quietly. People no longer gathered at her feet like they used to. The respect that once followed her had faded into whispers of what could have been. She stopped wearing bright colors. She stayed out of the market. She helped her father manage the home, but she no longer spoke of dreams, because she knew now. The dream she chased had passed her by. She had married no one. She had built nothing, all because she thought love must come in golden boxes instead of carved wooden ones. One day, an old woman passed her in the market and said, "Child, sometimes what we call a mistake is actually a mirror." Adesua nodded. She finally understood. As for Sekou, he found love again, this time not in beauty or status, but in kindness. Her name was Ngozi, a school teacher with fire in her soul and humility in her steps. She wore no expensive dresses, but when she laughed, it felt like music carved into the wind. And when Sekou gave her a simple wooden pendant one evening, carved by his own hand, she didn't laugh. She cried, and that was when he knew his past had ended and his future had begun. Years later, when Sekou stood before a hall filled with young builders, he told his story, not with bitterness, not with boast, but with truth. "I was once a poor boy who gave his heart to someone who didn't understand it," he said. "And she gave it back, broken. But from that brokenness I built." He paused, then smiled. "You see, life will hand you pain, but pain is not your ending. It is your tool. Build with it, rise with it, become more than they expected." The crowd clapped. Some cried, because in that moment they didn't just hear Sekou's voice, they heard their own. And as the sun set that night over the city, Sekou helped shape, with every wall he had raised, every life he had touched, and every quiet lesson he had lived. The boy who was once nothing had become everything, but not because of what he gained, because of who he became. Sometimes rejection is not the end. It is the beginning of your greatest transformation. Never chase wealth at the cost of character, and never judge a person by their present. For tomorrow may crown the one you once laughed at. Real strength is not in revenge, but in rising with dignity and becoming the person you were meant to be, even if no one claps for you along the way. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. Tap the bell icon too, so you never miss the next tale that could change your life. And tell us in the comments, have you ever been underestimated and then surprised everyone? We'd love to hear your story.